Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. YouTuber Oceaniz is here as we chat about Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection, the newest sequel to the JRPG spin-off series. We examine this game's unique position in the Monster Hunter hierarchy, the massive changes and upgrades in this new title, and our favorite monsties. Also, even more talk about Pokemon Pokopia. I'm addicted. Send help. And in the feature, let's keep it Capcom as I take you inside the newly opened Capcom Store Ikebukuro. Let's start the game section and Monster Hunter Stories 3 with Oceaniz. We're kicking off the game section with Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection, the newest game in Capcom's JRPG spin-off series. Joining me to chat all about it is a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Oceaniz. I am active on YouTube as a Monster Hunter content creator, and I had the amazing opportunity to check out Monster Hunter Stories very early and do review coverage for it. And so I am very happy that you invited me over to chat about the game here on your podcast. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much for joining me. Now, I like Monster Hunter well enough, but for such a monumental series, I gotta bring in an expert, which is you. Now, before we jump into this new game, I want to hear about your background a bit. How did you get into Monster Hunter, and what made you become a Monster Hunter YouTuber?
My first exposure to Monster Hunter was perhaps a bit later than you'll often hear from big fans of the series, because I first started with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, or 3G in Japan, and I tried it out on the 3DS, and I hated it. I could not get the controls working for my big hands on the 3DS. So I kind of left the series for a long time. I started doing YouTube independent of Monster Hunter. I covered other things for a long time. And then Monster Hunter World came out. And that game blew my mind. I played it multiple times, both on the PlayStation and on PC. And around that time, I decided, this is such a wonderful fantasy world, and it feels like it fits so well into the idea of making nature documentaries about these creatures. Why isn't anyone doing that yet? And before I knew it, I became that anyone doing that. It's been a ride ever since, basically.
Yeah, your YouTube channel has a very interesting premise where you really go deep on each monster. And for me, this is a series that also took a few attempts before I really got into it. The first Monster Hunter game I played was Monster Hunter Tri on Wii U. I liked it well enough, but then fell off. And then I got 4G on 3DS, and again, fell off. But then, like you, I got World, and I got really into it. I quote-unquote beat the game and cleared the story. For somebody like you, beating the story is essentially the tutorial, and then the real game starts. But for me, I played it for like dozens of hours, and I thought, okay, I guess I'm done with Monster Hunter World. But then I picked up Monster Hunter Stories 2 on Switch and thought, whoa, okay, this is more my speed. And for me, I consider Stories to be the main series, and the hunting games are the spin-offs. I'm curious to where the Stories sub-series ranks in the overall Monster Hunter pantheon. Do a lot of Monster Hunter fans really love this series, or is it considered to be this weird side thing that is for a different audience?
That's a very good question. The specific history of the Stories series is pretty intertwined with how it's been received, also especially in the West, because the first game came out on portable devices like the 3DS and was then ported to mobile phones. And it was a very limited experience. It had title updates that were exclusive to Japan, which obviously limited its reach overseas. And it was really Stories 2, where a lot of people like you had this wow moment where this could really be a thing. This isn't just some weird side game that you can only really play in Japan. This is an actual proper pillar of the series. That being said, I do think for most people, it's still just this weird spin-off that they haven't checked out. That is why I think Capcom went so hard on the marketing for Monster Hunter Stories 3, because it is just, you're experiencing right now, it's such a step up in presentation, in pathos and everything compared to even Monster Hunter Stories 2, which at the time, I remember I was there for the launch, it was already considered a very daring thing to give a spin-off that had done like middlingly well, such a high quality premium sequel. So where it ranks, I think a lot of fans are going to have to reconsider their rankings now that Monster Hunter Stories 3 is out. I can definitely say that much.
Yeah, it was first announced last year at the Nintendo Direct, and now it's out for all platforms. And when I first saw the game, obviously I was excited, but I also felt like they were going almost for a more mature audience and trying to break away from the idea that this is Monster Hunter for kids or quote unquote Monster Hunter Pokemon. What were your impressions about the game when it was announced?
Oh, I was head over heels because I loved Stories 2, and it's one of those games I kept returning to because I had this intense feeling that if you could just take Monster Hunter Stories 2 and polish it up a little, give it a couple more things that I was missing, it would be basically my dream game. So the prospect of Monster Hunter Stories 3 was incredible. And I agree with what you said. I agree that they definitely, from the get-go, tried to make this out to be a step forward in subject matter and in tone. I think the most obvious way they do that is also the way they've aged up the protagonists. Because in the first game, they're literal kids. In the second game, they're teenagers. And now we're young adults. So I was very excited. I did my only ever trailer review, trailer analysis video in my entire career that afternoon because I was so excited about the announcement and I needed to talk about it. That was an amazing reveal, and it really set up a lot of the hype that was to come.
All right, let's get into the game. I actually played it last year at Tokyo Game Show, and I was really impressed by the scope of the game. The demo came out, and again, it made me realize that, wow, Capcom is being very ambitious with this game in terms of new mechanics and scale. And people were doing a lot of fun things with the demo, like trying to find as many monsters as possible or seeing how high they could grind just in the opening area. And I have seen people say they played the demo for over 20 hours, which is a little crazy, but you can do that. It does have that much depth. But now we've got the full game. I'm only a few hours into it, and you've beaten it. So let's just do the one-to-one comparison. How would you say this game compares to Monster Hunter Stories 2?
Oh, 100% an upgrade. I think there's basically nothing I prefer in the second game over the third game. I think the loss of co-op is sad, but that's something they've been softly preparing us for a while now. The game was listed as single player only, and the European and American community managers have done a lot of work to make sure to set expectations. I don't actually know how the marketing side was over in Japan since I don't follow that, but over here at least it was very clear that this is a single player experience. But yeah, I loved it. I think the story, the Monster Hunter Stories, the main thing, is a huge upgrade. So much more well executed, so much more profound in what it's trying to do. And the gameplay, I mean, you've experienced it. It still has that Monster Hunter Stories flair to it. It still works mostly the same, but it just has enough additions to it, in my opinion, to where it really becomes more of a tactical game rather than in previous games where there was just a lot of randomness, a lot of stuff that you just couldn't really control. I don't know what your experience was with the end game of Monster Hunter Stories 2, but I remember trying to beat stuff like Rajang or Devil Joe and just not managing because the game was at times really unfair with how monsters would take multiple turns and whatnot. And I think with Stories 3, they've managed to make it feel a lot more fair without making it easier. As I said also in my review, this game kicked my butt and it kicked it really good.
Yeah, my knee-jerk impression was that, wait, this is not just more stories. They are actually changing up the core gameplay quite a bit and adding a lot of really fascinating features. But for you, what was the most surprising thing about the game?
I think the execution of the habitat restoration was a real highlight for me. When they first revealed it, I was already quite impressed. But then going hands-on with it, I was just over the moon for it. It's such a beautiful way to tie in both the story element of having to restore the land with the inherent gameplay fantasy of being this rider, taming monsters, making them your friends, and expanding that fantasy to also affecting the ecosystem, making sure there's healthy populations, making sure that releasing monsters is not just recycling, essentially, but that there's a purpose to it. And then you add mutations on top of it, and you add elemental swaps to it. And I was so impressed with how deep that system ended up being. And in fact, one of my only criticisms of the game is that I wish there were more mutations. I wish there was more to do with habitat restoration because it's so good. I love it so much.
Yeah, that's one of the bigger new additions is that you can release monsters into the environment and then they will, quote unquote, repopulate the environment. They'll appear more often and rarer variants will appear. But there's also the mechanic of, if you introduce this monster that's not native to this land to another land, they will mutate and they will get a different type. and they would get like a different color variation. So it is a really interesting idea that I'm trying to think if I've even ever seen this in any other video game where you can affect the random encounter pool of the game. That's such a really interesting idea for a JRPG. Just imagine in Pokemon, if you could introduce Pidgey into a different route, and then that Pidgey becomes like a electric Pidgey. That's basically the idea of Monster Hunter Stories 3. I'm still early in the game, but I'm really excited to see, if I put this monster in this field, it's going to be a fire type, and then, how is that going to sync with his other abilities? So I'm really excited to experiment with it. And we really haven't actually explained the actual gameplay loop of the game. It is a monster collecting JRPG where you have turn-based battles. You explore, you get new monsters and gear, and you fight. But what really separates Stories from a lot of the other monster collecting games is that each fight really does feel like a mini boss battle. What did you think about how a traditional Monster Hunter battle was translated into a turn-based one? And is there any new feature about this game's battle system that really engaged you?
I've been of the opinion for a long time that ever since Stories 2, they've really nailed down how to turn the tense real-time action of Monster Hunter into a turn-based game. I think that, for example, the fact that you cannot directly control your monsters without the use of a resource adds a lot of that sort of unpredictability to these creatures. It makes them feel more like animals fighting next to you that I really enjoy. And I think that the core combat system, where you have to essentially match up attack types in a sort of rock, paper, scissory way, is one of those things where when I first heard about it, I thought, that's whatever. I know rock, paper, scissors. That's not particularly difficult. But in practice, it becomes such a game of trying to keep all of these attack patterns and tendencies and previously experienced battles in your head that it does actually really emulate that sense of preparation, that sense of experience that you would get from getting into the end game of one of the core Monster Hunter series, right? If you want to fight an Anjanath in Stories 3, it's actually very similar to fighting an Anjanath in Monster Hunter World, where you need to remember, have I fought this monster before? What are its attack patterns? What are its specific weaknesses, as in openings, when it decides to not do a big move, when it decides to maybe wait and see or do a move that you can easily avoid? And I think that flow of battle has always been translated really well into Stories games. And because Stories 3 just doubles down on a lot of the things that made the previous games good in that regard, doubles down on predictable but difficult to counter enemy patterns and unique abilities per monster. By doing that, I think it becomes just the perfect translation of one gameplay system into another. As for new features, I think the new Wyvern Soul mechanic is really cool. Just to explain for the listeners, it's essentially a stamina bar on the monster, where certain attacks will deplete it, and once it's down, the monster will stagger, at which point it will either topple over, so you can do critical attacks, it will be exposed, so that it will only ever do attacks that you can easily counter, and various other benefits depending on the specific monster. And I think that's such a wonderfully natural addition to Stories, because if you remember in Stories 2, toppling monsters was a very rare thing that you could do, and it was very powerful. Right. I don't know if you ever made an Aptonoth build to go and hunt Fatalis, because it had the only guaranteed knockdown ability in the game. Luckily, those shenanigans are gone, as funny as they were. This time, toppling is a core mechanic that you can plan around, and I really love that.
Yeah, I think the earlier games were criticized for being very rock, paper, scissors. Like, there is literally 3 attack types that are all weak to each other. It is a weapon triangle situation. And yes, going back to Pokemon, there's going to be a lot of Pokemon analogies when you're talking about any sort of monster game. I do think of the colors. Okay, blue is strong against red because water is strong against fire, but green is strong against blue because grass is strong against water. So do you think the new mechanics in this game, in terms of the battle system, since they are a bit more complex, do you think people who maybe were turned off by the combat in previous games would enjoy it here?
I definitely think so. I think there is enough added depth to the point where you can consider this a pretty significant upgrade. So if combat was your sticking point with Monster Hunter Stories 2, if you thought that was a little too basic, I think Stories 3 is really going to interest you. I think you should give it a second shot.
Yeah, I definitely agree. In the past, in Monster Hunter Stories 2, the weapon triangle system, that was like the core mechanic of the battle system. However, here it's more of the foundation, and then there are so many things built upon it. Not the main tool you use, but a very vital tool. However, just like nailing the weapon triangle system is not going to make you win the battle. There's so many other elements that you need to think about, which I think a lot of people who maybe were turned off from, oh, the past games are too easy or too brain dead. It's like even simpler than Pokemon in terms of the type abilities. I think they'll be very impressed by how much you can pull off in the battle. And speaking of the battles, we got to talk about these special attack animations. Each one is basically like a mini movie, and they are so clever and well animated. It is truly one of those, you didn't have to do this type of things, but I love that Capcom put in the extra effort to make them stand out, like the sync attacks with the monsters.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite sync attack animation?
The easy one is Brachidios. I don't know if you've seen it, the training montage where you get to watch him grow up and get ready for boxing, and then he throws a massive punch at the end. That one's an easy favorite. It's been my favorite ever since Monster Hunter Stories 1, because it's mostly not changed. They've just added more flair to it. As far as new ones go, I really love Raydao's, which makes sense. Raydao is my favorite monster. So watching him slide through the sand and get his big ultimate attack ready is just so cool. I think in general, they've done a fantastic job on kinship attacks. Some of them are really short, which I don't dislike. I think it makes sense that, especially with faster monsters, you get these really quick flashes of them doing something cool, and then the enemy's on the floor, and he's received like 200 damage, and the battle goes on. Like, I think they've done a really good job at balancing both the length and the impact of each kinship attack. Do you have a favorite so far?
I'm trying to think about, what's the new ones? But I'm really fond for Puke Puke, where it does like the poison rain.
Yes.
And then he makes a little umbrella with his tongue.
Yes.
This is recycled from Monster Hunter Stories 2. Some of the old monsters do just have the same animation, but I don't care because those animations are just so good that to use them in one game is almost like a waste. So
Yeah.
I know some people are really picky about, asset reuse, but it's that good, all these animations. So I have no problem. They can use it until Monster Hunter 10 or Monster Hunter Stories 10.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
A-okay with me.
Absolutely.
Because these animations are just so fun to watch, even if they're 5 seconds. Some of them are quite long, like 30 seconds, and you might just, they do let you skip them. Okay, I've seen this animation quite a few times, so I don't mind skipping it. And yes, you can, listeners, if you want a tip, you can speed up the battles. If you press the plus button on Switch or another button on other consoles, you can make it like 2 times speed if you really want to go through the battles. But definitely, they're worth watching the animations. Another major new thing is the overhauled monster raising system includes dual elements, which also affects their appearance. What do you think about how this is balanced within the game?
I think it's one of those things that was inevitable that they were going to add, because element swapping and color changing monsties was a thing that was originally introduced in Monster Hunter Stories 1 and was very beloved there. And then Monster Hunter Stories 2, it was technically included, but it didn't work very well. It had a bunch of technical problems, and so it was patched out, actually, very shortly after the game came out. And so I think I speak for a lot of Stories fans when I say that we were all a little hungry for this feature, for an ability to once again change the colors and elements of our monsters. And the way it's executed in Stories 3, I think, is quite clever, because it isn't swapping, it's dual elements now. So you can actually just use it either as a way to give your monster new abilities, or you can just use it the way I used it, as a cosmetic thing. I wanted a Lagiacrus that was orange, but I didn't necessarily want it to do fire. I just wanted it to look different. So because of that, I haven't experimented as much with it in terms of like power and strategizing. I do think that one really needs to remember it's dual element. So the additional element is not generally going to be strong enough to fully replace the birth element of the monster. For example, your ultimate attack and your basic attacks are still going to be whatever element the monster originally had, which I do think is a bit of a shame. But again, I see why they did it like that. I still think you can do some pretty snazzy stuff with the combinations. In my first playthrough, I had an Ice Raydao that I used to just inflict a skill seal on everyone. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun, seeing him just throw giant ice boulders out of his railgun.
Okay, let's touch on the story a bit. Like I said before, it definitely feels like Capcom is trying to make it a bit more mature compared to past titles. For one, like you said earlier, you aren't a kid, but instead an ambiguously aged young adult. And the supporting cast are also all adults, except for your trainee character, Thea. So what did you think overall about the story of the game?
I think it was quite excellent. Just to put that out of the way, I love the story from start to finish. I think that just by making the characters a little older, it opens the story up for so many more interesting conflicts. And I think that's realized very well through both the new voiced protagonist. I played the game in English, and I think the English voiceover is phenomenal for the protagonist specifically. And I like that from the beginning, there's this tension between the more friendshipy aspects of the group, trying to relate to your various team members in the Rangers, versus the grander world conflict between Arzuria and Vermeil, where your father, the king, for example, forces you to enlist in the military and says, no, there's going to be a war, and you kind of just want to hang out with your monster buddies and go and research the environment. I think that tension is immediately very engaging. It just keeps going from there. I think that you keep running into these very interesting character conflicts, especially once you go out of the first area and into the stuff that the demo hasn't shown yet. You're going to be faced with a lot of conflicts, a lot of contradictions, a lot of texture to the story that I think the previous games could not have pulled off. And so I'm really happy that they managed to do it. I also think that the team this time around, the cast, is very strong. In the previous games, you had a rotating team member every once in a while. Whereas here, having the Rangers as this consistent constellation really works, especially with the side stories. I loved Ogden and Korra, for example. I think they were my favorite characters.
Yeah, it has a really interesting premise where basically two Rathalos are born, which haven't been born in who knows how long. And this is seen as an omen. And then your mom, who is the queen, you are a prince or princess. She steals one of the Rathalos, so she's instantly branded as like a traitor, which is like a really interesting idea for a JRPG. And another thing that I've never seen before, and I think any sort of RPG, is that when you create your character, it makes like a kid version of your character as well.
Yes.
And it looks like your adult version, like a kidified version. That's such like a really cool idea. And this game is just filled with so many amazing, just small touches like that you wouldn't expect. And you mentioned the side stories and the cast of your ranger characters. Since you're like on this ranger group and you're going and exploring the local region, every single person in your ranger squad is so different. And again, everybody looks so cool. The character designs in this game are really outstanding. And something that the game does very early on, especially after the demo, is that it unlocks the side stories. You're at your ranger camp and every single ranger has a side story icon above them. So you can start their side story. And they are very much worth doing immediately because you learn more about the characters. They are fairly quick, but each of their own gameplay mechanic or mission is like quite different from each other. And they give you like a really useful item. So I thought this is very smart idea in, okay, you're going to get to know your ranger buddies and we're going to reward you with interesting gameplay and also really cool unlocks. So it's definitely worth doing. And just in general, it is so interesting to expand upon the universe of Monster Hunter. The main games are just so focused on, here's your base camp, you go and fight monsters, nothing else matters. But the stories games do make you think that, oh, I guess there are like kings and knights and things like that in the world of Monster Hunter. Can you help me pinpoint what is the genre of Monster Hunter's setting? I guess it's fantasy, but there's no real magic. Is it like low fantasy, or how would you describe it?
Oh, that's all kind of worms. Fantasy fans will be coming for me no matter what I say. But I think the best way to describe Monster Hunter Stories setting is maybe something like fantasy punk, where it borrows elements from fantasy. It borrows a lot of world-building elements from very traditional fantasy worlds, but then fuses it with Monster Hunter, which kind of doesn't map on anything that directly fits into literary genres. You caught me at a very great time for this, because I am currently writing and producing a documentary on the production of Monster Hunter 1. And a lot of that is the team under Fujioka-san trying to figure out what is the genre of this world and landing on this fusion of fantasy elements, but also a world full of monsters that follow more so the rules of ecology and natural balance than you would expect from something like Dungeons and Dragons. And I think Stories expands on it by adding stronger fantasy elements to it while still maintaining that ecology, especially in Stories 3. Because, as you correctly said, there is no magic. In fact, during the production of Monster Hunter 1, one of the main tenets that Fujioka-san put on the team was no magic. Find other solutions.
Yeah, I kind of want to call it leather fantasy because so many people are wearing leather jackets and tunics and like huge bags and just stitching and laces and whatnot. And anytime you see armor, it is often very atypical from a lot of other fantasy settings, since it is made out of animals and bones. And oftentimes you get very silly outfits that look like scuba gear made out of snake and things like that. So let's talk about the aesthetics a bit. Do you have a favorite armor set that you like to wear?
Yes, and this is the same one in every game. I love the Damascus armor set, which is very regal looking black metal armor. I just think it looks amazing on most characters. I also like making characters with white hair. Black armor, white hair, classic combo, just works. And yeah, I think the armor designs in Monster Hunters have always been top notch. And Stories 3, in general, the Stories series really benefits from its more anime-like art style because you get to see these armors in ways that you've never seen them before. Because the main games try generally quite hard to look realistic, to have realistic texture and materials. So seeing them in this more cel-shaded art style is always really fun. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one thing I like about it is that as opposed to Monster Hunter, where you fight this long battle and then you get enough items to make Nergigante shoes or something like that, here you just get the whole armor set at once. So it's a really great streamlining of the Monster Hunter mechanics. And it's always fun to see, oh, what is my armor going to look like? Because you never know. It could really just be anything. Like the Paolumu gear is like this huge puffy, I don't even know how to describe it. You have a top hat almost, or like a captain hat. It's ridiculous, but it's also very fun. And this game is really great with customization in terms of, you can change the colors of every single armor set and things like that. And now you can change the colors of your monsties. By the way, what do you think about the term monsties?
You've got me. I do not like it. I think...
Yeah, I guess I have to call them something different, or maybe they don't, but it doesn't feel good in your mouth.
What is it in Japanese? Is it Otomonsta or...
I should look that up. I'm not sure actually, but monsties is just like I don't know. It's just, they're technically not monsters because they're smaller and you ride them, but it's just like a funny word that I think everyone just doesn't like this word, but they're sticking with it.
I think it's one of those like big leftovers from when the series was still very much about and for kids, right? When you have 9-year-old protagonists in the first game, it makes sense that they'd call them monsties.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Stories 3, there were a couple of times where there's a big serious scene happening and they refer to your monsties, and I'm like, man.
Now, you've played the game for 100 hours.
Yes,
what's the big thing that's hooking you? Is there just a lot to do, or are you honing on one specific gameplay feature like the habit restoration, or what?
I am mostly obsessing over the Monsterpedia completion, because that is surprisingly a very involved task. Because I obviously am big on the lore and the ecology of the series, and one thing I noticed immediately was that the Monsterpedia now includes a lot of information that was previously exclusive to the various books that Capcom has released. And the moment I saw this, I knew I needed to hunt down every single ecology clue. I needed to fill out these pages because that is incredible to me. The Monster Hunter books are fantastic. I love them. I have 30 of them on my shelf behind me. And so I really want to see how much they've included. And getting those complete Monsterpedia pages, as I said, it can get quite involved. There's a lot of side questing involved. There's a lot of boss fights involved. In fact, Monsterpedia completion is one of the main rewards you get for completing some of the optional super boss encounters later in the late and end game. So that's been mostly what I've been doing with my time. Yeah, that's been my big thing. Obviously, in doing that, I've done most of the other things that the game has to offer.
Yeah, I played Stories 2 for about 50 hours, and that was just to clear the story. I didn't end up getting all the monsties or anything like that. So I can see how somebody could spend so much time into the game, because this is a huge JRPG. Now, the series has seen success. The first game probably sold close to 1 million, although we don't have that much data on it. But Capcom did say that Stories 2 sold over 2 million, so a notable bump. And Capcom seemed happy enough with those figures since, hey, we got a third game. So why do you think Stories has yet to really break through, though? And do you think 3 has the potential to reach people who have been ignoring the series?
I think the problem that Stories 2 faced was mostly that it did very much look like a game for children when you just looked at it in trailers. It still had that sort of look to it because the protagonists were quite young. A lot of the trailer footage, a lot of the promotional footage focused on characters like Naviru, who immediately screams Saturday morning cartoon character. There's that, and I also think Stories 2, if I remember correctly, had a lot of performance problems out the gate. It struggled a lot on the Switch, and even on PC, it wasn't a perfectly smooth experience. I think the combination of these two held it back to some degree. That being said, I also think there's just a general level of apprehension in the general gaming population regarding turn-based games. I think there's always a bit of a hurdle for people to overcome. But we also did see last year that games like Expedition 33 can really push people to try new genres that they might not be interested in. So who knows? I think Stories 3 presents a really great opportunity to finally overcome that hurdle. I think Capcom has really focused on the right things in their marketing this time, with the focus on the story, the focus on the characters, the focus on the habitat restoration, the focus on the amazing roster of monsters that now a lot of fans would already know and be familiar with, because the roster includes so many familiar faces from Rise, which also was a fairly popular Monster Hunter game. So I think that Stories 3 has the potential to finally break through that turn-based spin-off barrier and become a big success. And I certainly hope it does so, because I need Stories 4, I need Stories 5, I need Stories 10, as you said. Just keep making them, Capcom, please.
For me, Stories 2 was one of the best JRPGs on Switch, bar none. It had huge environments to explore, a very deep and fun monster customization mechanic, and the battles were very much like a streamlined version of Monster Hunter battles. They took everything fun about those fights in the main game and distilled them down into 5 minutes while still keeping them really exciting throughout the entire fight. In Stories 3, I'm still early, but it does feel like they're doing everything absolutely better than 2. And this is coming from somebody who is no means a Monster Hunter hardcore. I just like JRPGs. And I think a lot of people who are just into JRPGs, they see Monster Hunter Stories and they're like, oh, well, I don't like Monster Hunter, so why would I pick this up? You should still definitely put it on your radar, because it is just a really fascinating and very different monster collecting JRPG. And there's so many mechanics in this game that we've talked about that I've not seen in just any other JRPG before. So it's really its own unique thing. So if you're looking for something that is very different from the typical JRPG mold, I definitely recommend you check out Monster Hunter Stories. And you can just start with the third one. Now, before we wrap up, Monster Hunter seems rife for even more spin-offs. So what kind of other Monster Hunter spin-offs would you like to see? Like a racing game, Picross, or what?
You can't ask me that when I have Pokopia on my mind.
Yeah, let's get into that. What if there was a Monster Hunter Pokopia? Would that be up your alley?
The tragedy there is that exists. It just wasn't very successful at the time.
Oh.
It's called Airu Village, and it's about the felines having a village where monster companions come. Yeah. And honestly, I would be up for them just reviving that series now that they've seen that there's more potential in spin-offs, because I think there is actually a lot of room there for a sort of Monster Hunter cozy game, so to speak. I think that the cast of monsters that the series has created now over the years is very charismatic, can really attract people just through their design and through the relationships people have built with them as enemies. So seeing them as like friends, seeing them as neighbors that you build a house for or build a cave for, I think would be pretty cool. Otherwise, I know people have always said they want a Monster Hunter fighting game, which I struggle to fully imagine, seeing how many monsters are quadrupeds, but I also kind of want to see what they'd come up with. I think that'd be really fun. But yeah, honestly, I do think that Stories is, in a sense, the platonic ideal for a Monster Hunter spin-off. I think it ticks all the boxes I would want. Being there that you can build friendly relationships with monsters, and that you can put more focus on the world building and on storytelling that you perhaps don't do as much in the main series.
Yeah, after playing Pokopia, I just think, every genre or every series should just have a Pokopia version.
Yes.
So a Monster Hunter Pokopia, I would definitely want to check it out. And by the way, a Monster Hunter character has to be in the next Smash Brothers game, right?
Yes.
And if so, who would you like to see?
The obvious answer would just be like a generic hunter that can switch between weapons. How the Dragon Quest hero, if I remember correctly, in Smash Ultimate was able to switch between spells. Something like that, I think, would be really cool. Otherwise, there is that really famous video of someone making Nergigante like fist fight. So I think there's potential for Nergigante in Smash. And otherwise, other fun pick, Rajang.
Yeah, I definitely think somebody, somehow, some way is going to be in the next Smash Brothers. I'm surprised they weren't in Ultimate, but maybe they're saving it up for the new one. So that was a look at Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection, available on Switch 2, PC, PS5, Xbox, maybe one day phones, because Stories 1 did come to phones, but we might be a few decades away from it running on phones. But until then, Oceaniz, where can people find you?
People can find me on Blue Sky at Oceaniz96. You can also find me on YouTube. The channel's just called Oceaniz, the way my name is spelled, where I make regular videos on the world building and stories of the Monster Hunter universe. As I said, one of my upcoming projects is a documentary on how Monster Hunter was made, and I hope people enjoyed that. That was a ton of work.
Great. And the links to everything are in the podcast description, so listeners, check it out. Oceaniz, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun. I'm really happy that you invited me.
Okay, I got to talk about Pokopia again. I spoke very highly of it last episode, but now that I'm deeper into the game, I didn't go high enough. I had truly not even scratched the surface. And maybe I still haven't, even though I have rolled credits. I put so much time into the game, completed all the main story missions, and then I realized, oh, I have less than half of the Pokemon in the Pokedex. It's one of those games where on how long to beat, it says main story, 30 hours, completionist, 4,000 hours. Although I'm sure I would get completely burned out of it one day, it is one of those titles where I will get the urge to pick it up again and put in another 30 hours or so of gameplay until I get burned out yet again, rinse and repeat. Or maybe I just won't play any more video games after this. I don't need them. After a tough battle in Monster Hunter Stories 3, I have been like, let's hit up Pokopia for a little bit. By now, I'm sure you've seen everyone's insanely beautiful towns on social media. People have created Japanese onsens, roller coasters, recreations of other Pokemon towns, gigantic skyscrapers, and so on. I'm not built like that. Making a brick road is even too much for me. But I think the real strength of the game for the average person is that the main quest is so propulsive while also introducing new and engaging mechanics at the perfect time. What you think each area's main mission is going to be is not that. The game throws so many curveballs at you. The second area I went to was Bleak Beach, and it's completely dark no matter what time it is. And the architecture of the buildings is totally different. Plus, there's a lot of water everywhere and a new traversal challenge. And the quest of that area is trying to light up the entire map with electricity and other methods. I would have never expected that, and it brings in a lot of new gameplay mechanics to mess with. Another area is a huge mountain and volcano, so now you have access to lava and better digging techniques. Then a later area is just a bunch of sky islands. We're talking sky islands here. Sadly, no Zonai devices. They could have at least given us one. And within each of these stages are just little interesting areas that teach you about what you can do. The mountain area, it's a bunch of mines and rocks and lava, but there's also a little irrigated farm area that you can experiment with. The Sky Islands have areas with dilapidated office buildings, but also a scenic waterfall and cave system. Even near the end of the game, I realized that, there's a whole other huge area behind the starting Pokemon Center. And even that has a secret game-spanning side quest in a hidden area. Keep in mind, unlike Minecraft, these levels are completely handcrafted. I'm just so impressed by how dense they are, and just when you think you've figured it out, they will show you something that you could have never predicted. The levels are also filled with a lot of cool one-of-a-kind items. A neon Raichu sign? I'll be stealing that. We always talk about exploration in games. What makes exploration fun in games? Is it just a huge open map where you can go where you want? Is it finding items? I went into this cave and found a sword. That means the exploration is good, right? But I think when it comes to exploration in games, you need to strike a balance between finding useful items, engaging in interesting gameplay mechanics, and evoking feelings. Now, what game has the best exploration? Say it with me now. 3, 2, 1. Tears of the Kingdom. Because it not only rewards players with things, but also experiences. And by experiences, I mean unique gameplay segments, but also creating memories and making the player feel emotional in an unexpected way. Like in Tears of the Kingdom when you just stop playing to look at the sunset. And Pokopia nailed these aspects when it comes to what I want when it comes to exploration in games. It's not only constantly giving you stuff, but also shows you the potential about what you can do, what you can create. You are constantly guided to areas that teach you radical new things. Oh wait, I can make hot springs. Oh, I didn't know that I could set up electricity this way. Oh, and now I can even make a Pokemon gym. And the world is built in a way where you can either level it completely and do your own thing, or you can fix existing areas. Like the train track system in Rocky Ridges. You can just make your own track system, or you can just fill in the gaps of an existing one, and you've got a somewhat pre-built awesome minecart track. I'm definitely more of a fix-it guy than a let's build the Sistine Chapel type of person. And let's be real, I'm a sucker for Gen 1, and since this game takes place in Kanto, visiting these famous Kanto landmarks again, especially with the framing that has been destroyed and abandoned, it is very effective and emotional. The lore you learn just by how the areas are built, but also the notes and letters you find, is genuinely touching, and you become invested in this mysterious version of Kanto, invested in the characters you've never met, and of course, your Pokemon pals as you uncover more about them. Now, if you don't have any deeper attachment to Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, I can't say it's going to bring you to your knees, but as somebody who at one time thought Pokemon Blue was the most important game in the world, the game magically pulls off a truly moving story with a beautiful ending. If they just set it in a generic Pokemon place, I don't think it would have been effective. So they were very smart to set it in the place where most people have the strongest emotional attachment. Omori is the director, so I gotta give the folks at Game Freak credit, but you can also tell that the devs at Koei Tecmo who made the game love Pokemon. Koei Tecmo also made Pokemon Conquest. Remember that? It was awesome. Let Koei Tecmo make more Pokemon games, please. And you can tell how much they love Pokemon by just how they treat the Pokemon in this game. Last episode, I said that the personalities of the Pokemon were not as diverse as something like Animal Crossing, since they all are fairly cheery, but I think that was vastly underselling it. It is incredible by just how much personality the Pokemon convey in their dialogue. The story mandatory Pokemon get a bit more love, like Piplup, but everyone gets completely unique introductory dialogue. All the Pokemon interact with each other in fun ways, like they'll play tag or talk to each other, and sometimes they even get into arguments. I saw Heracross and Pinsir arguing about which one was stronger. They act like two kings can't coexist. It's sad. Again, one thing that the Pokemon games have been really trying to convey is that you live alongside Pokemon. In a lot of the RPGs, this is mostly reduced to just, we put some Pokemon inside this town. You can talk to Slowpoke. With the open world games, we see Pokemon in their natural habitat living their lives, something that was done convincingly in Arceus, but less convincingly in Scarlet and Violet. But here it finally feels like we are seeing how Pokemon live and how they interact with each other. Although I do think new Pokemon Snap was also very effective in this regard. And the idea of living with Pokemon ties into the habitat system and the customization when it comes to making these areas where the Pokemon live. Yeah, you can put everyone in a house, but I like to make them as authentic as possible. It's so cool to see Noctowl high up on a tree, or Bulbasaur frolicking in the grass, Graveler hanging around limestone, or Charcadet walking around a lava area. Every time I enter an area, it feels like Pokemon are really going about their own lives, having their own adventures. And I do love building habitats. When you're missing an item, or there's one you've never even seen before on the habitat guide, it is almost like a side quest within itself. How am I going to get this chic sofa? Off I go. And the game does a fantastic job in giving you the pieces without you realizing it. This habitat requires a lantern, wheelbarrow, and shovel? I don't think I've seen that. Wait, maybe they're in the mine area? Then you go there and yes, you can find these items right under your nose. Even a lot of items that may seem rare, you might have actually bumped into them before. I still think it is more fun to figure out the habitats by yourself, but they do become pretty complicated later on in the game, so the habitat dex is very useful. But even if you know the habitat, getting all the pieces and setting it up is its own mission. Oh, and I've also been messing around on a Cloud Island, which is the online customizable area that you can join anytime after it's been set up. You could just spend all your time in here. I'm doing it with a couple of folks, and it's so fun to see everyone's own individual progress, but also how everybody is helping out. And the fact that you can just jump in anytime without a host? Amazing. Though letting people set up essentially their own island without an individual host paying for it? I guess Nintendo is paying those bills. So do prepare for the Cloud Island is shutting down news story in about 10 years. Well, for me, Pokemon Pokopia has just been a complete surprise. A beautiful, wonderful surprise. Again, Dragon Quest Builders fans, you were right. You were always right. We were fools for ever doubting this game for a second. The game is developed by Omega Force, mostly known for the Warrior series, but they did work on DQ Builders too. I don't know a lot about the team structure or how many people worked on both Pokopia and a Warriors game, but honestly, considering the sales, which I'll talk about in the news, they should just look into making more of these types of games, with the Pokemon IP or not. Pokopia 2 in another region, yes, that would be awesome, but honestly, I kind of don't need it because this game is borderline infinite in its content and what you can do. I would like to see DLC, which I'm sure is coming. I guess slight spoilers for what's not in the game, but the big one would have to be a Lavender Town inspired area. I'd also like to see some underwater stuff, maybe inspired by Seafoam Islands. You could get a little spicy and have a Mount Silver inspired map. I think that is technically within the borders of Kanto. It might be like a Shizuoka and Yamanashi type of thing with Mount Fuji, where Johto and Kanto both share Mount Silver. And either through DLC or just an update, I would like a universal storage system, although maybe that's not technically in the spirit of the game's management system, but I still want it. But even without it, Pokopia has been an incredible experience thus far, and I'll keep playing it, maybe for years, maybe for eons, if we can figure out this immortality thing. if it's not in my top 5 on the Game of the Year episode, well, we had the greatest year in the history of gaming because 5 better games this year honestly seems unfathomable. Unless Nintendo releases 5 3D Mario games, then we might be in trouble. Okay, that's all for the games. Let's get into the feature. Today's feature is on Capcom Store Ikebukuro, the newest official Capcom shop that opened up in Tokyo last month. I learned about this the good old-fashioned way, walking around Ikebukuro Station and then seeing a billboard for it. I legit didn't know of its existence until that. You can't just rely on social media for news. You gotta hit the streets. This is the second Capcom store in the city, with the first being Capcom Store Tokyo in Shibuya, which opened up in late 2019 alongside Shibuya Parco, home of Nintendo Tokyo. I gotta say, bad foresight to call that one Capcom Store Tokyo, since we now have 2. Although Osaka also has 2 Capcom stores, Capcom Store Osaka and Capcom Store Umeda, you would think they would have learned by now. By the way, I looked up the other Capcom stores because I just assumed it was Tokyo and Osaka, but no, Kobe and Sendai also have Capcom stores. There's also one in Shanghai and one in Taipei is opening up this week. So Capcom is being fairly aggressive with its merch marketing. But Capcom is no stranger to Ikebukuro, as the Plaza Capcom Arcade and Capcom Cafe are also there. I'm trying to think about what's the real connection between Capcom and Ikebukuro, because their Tokyo office is in Shinjuku, and Shibuya and Ikebukuro are not that far from each other, just a handful of stops on the Yamanote line. It would make more sense to have Capcom Store Shibuya and Capcom Store Akihabara or something like that. But Ikebukuro is kind of a major otaku hotspot. The famed Otome Road is there, and the Ikebukuro Parco every now and then will host some sort of gaming exhibit or event. And historically, some of the famous videos you see of people lining up for Dragon Quest are in Ikebukuro. Maybe Capcom wants to just open a shop close enough to the cafe, but either way, we got a new one. I went to it, and let's step inside. It's on the B2 floor of Parco Ikebukuro that's attached to Ikebukuro Station. People always say Shinjuku or Shibuya Station are labyrinthian, but honestly, Ikebukuro might have them beat. I do somehow manage to come out of the same exit despite snaking around the entire station and getting lost. But if you can get out of the station, you don't need to go far, or maybe you can technically get into it from the station. Again, it's really confusing. Parco Ikebukuro was recently renovated, and some of the big new additions are on the B2 floor, like Capcom Store Ikebukuro and soon a new Jump shop. It's not quite cyberspace Shibuya tier in terms of otaku shops, but it's at least progressing towards that a little bit. The floor is named Pop Culture Base, and currently it has Capcom Store Ikebukuro, soon the Jump shop, Palme d'Amour Tokyo, which sells candied apples. Yes, candied apples. There's also going to be some Star Wars store fairly soon, and Eins and Tulip, which is an apparel shop. Now, shockingly, that shop also had a gaming collaboration when Capcom Store Ikebukuro opened, and it's based on the hottest gaming character of 2026, Parappa the Rapper. They sold some very expensive high-end Parappa-themed streetwear. I didn't pick anything up, but it was cool to see a store solely selling Parappa clothing. And Parappa was supposed to be there in person, but unfortunately, I never saw him. I did briefly see PJ Barry walking away, but sadly, I didn't get to see Parappa in the flesh, or in the fur. But let's actually go to the store. Actually, let's not, because the first thing you'll probably notice is outside the store. A big statue of Juri crouching on a tire and a wall of Street Fighter 6 graffiti behind her. The Tokyo and Osaka locations have Ryu, so it is nice that Ikebukuro mixes it up a little bit. And it specifically evokes Street Fighter 6. And it's as close to a life-size Juri as you're going to get. But ironically, the whole scene is behind glass. I guess they really don't want you to touch Juri. And she doesn't want you touching her either, so I understand. Unlike the open floor plan and multiple entrances like the Shibuya location, there's only one main entrance that funnels you into the shop. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any info on square footage online, so I don't know which one is actually bigger, but they at least feel about the same. The design of the store also kind of mimics the Osaka location a bit more, with its darker walls and the huge Capcom logo splashed across the ceiling. The Shibuya location, again, it's not in its own sequestered area. It doesn't really have, like, a ceiling, and it does feel a little cheap and makeshift compared to the Pokemon Center and Nintendo Tokyo in the same spot. But here, Capcom gets its own little area, with walls and everything. And on the outside wall, there's a great splash art of the logo of the Capcom store, featuring a lot of Capcom characters. And on this splash art is somebody who I guarantee most people don't know. Haruto. Do you know Haruto? You get one guess before I answer. Go ahead, try to guess. Who is Haruto? That's right, he's from Capcom's Toware no Paruma series, which is an Otome game franchise. I do like his inclusion right under Rathalos. He is that important. And hey, I'm sure the Pokemon merch sells pretty well. Otome fans are very loyal, and they aren't shy when it comes to spending cash. But I do like the splash art has a character that even I don't know. Now, when you step into the store, the first display is for new merch. And this time, it was merch based around the Capcom character illustrations from Chihiro Mita. She's an artist at Capcom who has worked on many titles, including Toraware no Paruma. And yes, you can tell the art is from an Otome artist, since it is a bit more painterly, and everyone looks gorgeous, even the Palico. You had your main Capcom folks represented, Leon, Claire, Mega Man, Dante, Phoenix, Ryu, Morgan, and so on, and so forth. Now, by merch line, I mean, they took all these great character illustrations and just slapped them on everything. Clear files, pin badges, the accursed acrylic stands, tote bags. But maybe the most interesting item from this line was a tin of cookies with the character art printed on the cookies. So if you want to eat a Chun-Li cookie, this is your only chance. I always want to collect these tins, like the Mary's Pokemon chocolate come in these really cool Pokemon-themed tins, but my wife always throws them out. I mean, we could use the tins. I don't know for what, but one day we're going to be like, I wish we had those Pokemon chocolate tins. So past that main display, in the back is the register, and behind them is a cool Capcom mural showcasing upcoming games like Pragmata and Onimusha. They certainly have a lot coming out this year, so I wonder when they will update this thing. Maybe never, who knows? Mega Man Star Force would just have a permanent location next to the register. On the right wall, there's a big poster of RE9, so like Nintendo Tokyo, that's where they would put the big key art for whatever is their new game. The right wall is also what I would call the Monster Hunter area, with statues and plushies and everything else. Now, the Shibuya location has half the store pretty much dedicated solely to Monster Hunter, with a Monster Hunter photo op, but that isn't here. It is much more of a standard unified design. Speaking of Monster Hunter merch, I don't know if this is new or not, but there was merch of the Palico for Monster Hunter Wilds, like plushies and bags and tumblers and so on. Now to the left, the store continues on a bit more, so the interior is actually bigger than it looks from the outside. Here it's mostly grouped by series, so you have the Mega Man area, and by the way, it is crazy how much Mega Man Legends and Battle Network merch there is. Battle Network is actually more popular in Japan than any of the platformer series. Just look up the sales data. But I don't think Capcom is anywhere close to making a new Battle Network game for whatever reason. And Legends, well, you've got the Servbots, who should have been as popular as the Minions. It is literally the exact same idea and design. I mean, what happened, Capcom? Were no lawyers contacted? By the way, a Legends collection? That's gotta be what? Next year, at least? Come on. There's also a general collab or crossover section that sold Capcom-themed Hyakunin Isshu, which is a traditional Japanese card game. This is right up my alley when it comes to merch, but I already have maybe 2 sets of Hyakunin Isshu, and the Capcom one is a little expensive. But they were also selling stickers and posters of the designs of the individual cards. So if you just want the Akuma card, you can get something with that art splashed on it. And well, that's basically it. Not an earth-shattering inclusion into the pantheon of gaming stores in Tokyo, but if you're a fan of Capcom's big franchises, you will find something to pick up. Ironically, they didn't really sell everything here, since some companies like Grafty have exclusive Capcom merch they sell in their own stores and pop-up shops. I think some of it is here, but not everything. There's nothing really majorly different from the Shibuya location except for the lack of the Monster Hunter photo op, but I do always like to see these stores that aren't exactly uniform. They do blend in a lot of inspirations from the other Capcom stores, but also adding something new to each location, something I have to imagine they've learned from the Pokemon centers. It is pretty amazing to see this massive influx of gaming merch stores in the 2020s, though, in Japan. Nintendo, Sega, Capcom, Square, and Namco have all opened up major retail locations since late 2019. Plus, Tokyo has a new Pokemon Center or two since the early 2020s. I kind of wonder who is missing. We don't have a big Konami shop. Koei Tecmo had a store, but it closed. And even then, I felt like that store was nowhere near the potential it could have had. SNK also had a store that closed, but I think they do have some sort of pop-up location in Akihabara now. We don't have a big PlayStation store either, but there is a lot of PlayStation-specific merch at other stores, and Grafty has a new PlayStation pop-up store like every other week. I'm trying to think about what company would get me excited. I don't know, how about an intelligent systems focused shop? There is no Fire Emblem merch in Nintendo Tokyo, and you gotta put that stuff somewhere, so let's just have a Fire Emblem store, why not? Okay, that's all for the feature, let's check out the news. It's been 5 minutes since I talked about Pokopia, so let's swing back to that. Nintendo announced it sold 2.2 million copies in 4 days, with nearly 1 million being from Japan alone, thrusting it into the upper echelon of Pokemon spin-offs. Great news, but let's be real. This is going to have legs and it's not going to rely on a huge opening weekend. It is a legit system seller, and Nintendo's big holiday game for 2026, it might be Pokopia in a sense. I'm sure mini Switch 2s with Pokopia will be under the tree this year. I am curious about the ceiling, of course. Are we talking 20 million plus? Are we talking that it kind of fizzles out at about 5 million? Maybe the respectable 10 million range? Very hard to say right now, but it got amazing reviews, players love it, the game will probably get a decent stream of content updates and or DLC. There's no other Pokemon game this year. There's a lot of advantages for it right now. As the Switch 2 install base grows, so would the game sales. It will be a quiet juggernaut like Luigi's Mansion 3 and Switch Sports. Mario Day. It happened. We didn't get a direct or a new game, but we did get a new trailer for the movie, and maybe the biggest news is that Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is hitting May 21st, so that is the May game. I was thinking that maybe it would be in April alongside Tomodachi Life, since the trend so far has been a Switch 1 game launching alongside a Switch 2 game, but maybe Nintendo thinks Tomodachi Life is big enough to carry the month. And technically, Xenoblade X Switch 2 Edition is getting a physical version in April, so maybe Nintendo counts that. Who knows? And Yoshi looks, like a slow puzzle platformer. The painterly illustrated art style looks wonderful, but this game is not exactly lighting a fire in me. 007 First Light comes out in May on Switch 2, so maybe put that on your radar instead. Interestingly enough, it is lower priced than normal at all stores outside of the US eShop, which doesn't have a price yet. I've seen some people say it's $60, but I don't know what that source is, or if it's just an assumption based on the pricing of the other regions. I did see some reputable sites say it was $60, so I said that on social media, but now I look like a fool. A fool. But Yoshi is 7,000 yen in Japan. Compare that to the near 9,000 yen price tag for something like Pokopia, and 8,000 yen for something like Bonanza and Air Riders. I kind of feel that 7,000 yen should be the default price for first-party Nintendo games in Japan, but the yen is weaker than a Magikarp right now, so Nintendo is trying to balance that out. But it is nice to see Nintendo release a game that is a bit lower priced than normal. They experimented a lot in the Switch 1 era with prices for first-party games. We got games at 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 bucks published by Nintendo. And Jump Rope Challenge was technically $0. The only non-$70 first-party game in the Switch 2 era is Dragon Drive at $20, and Switch 2 Edition upgrades are priced kind of all over the place, so that ties in with Nintendo's recent history of price experimentation, and Furukawa's statement that Nintendo wants to release different experiences that can be developed faster. But I think we can all agree that launching Mario Kart World at $80 did not help soothe consumer worries about game prices, especially considering the current, world economy. People are just wondering when is the next $80 game, something that could have easily been avoided. And I can confirm the next $80 game will be the Star Fox and Tellero Boxer crossover game, Tellero Foxer. We also saw some more of Mario Wonder's Switch 2 Edition, which again, honestly looks fine, but skippable. And this is coming from somebody who loved Wonder. For single-player gamers, the pitch is, hey, want to mess around in levels you've already played before? I mean, yeah, the dual badge system looks fun to experiment with, and I'm sure if I sat down and played as Rosalina and fought a Koopaling, I'd have a great time. But this is not a new Luigi U tier DLC. And guys, Pokopia is out. Monster Hunter Stories 3 is out. I love you, Mario, but I only have so much time. Seriously, I am playing a stupid amount of games concurrently. Pokopia, Monster Hunter Stories 3, Pokemon Leaf Green, I got to Cerulean City, and I don't know, I'm sure I will beat it one day if I get the itch. I actually also picked up Assassin's Creed Shadows a while ago, and I'm actually enjoying it, but Pokopia did kind of pull my attention away from that. Again, that's a game I want to beat one day. I also got Caves of Cud and was completely fascinated by it, but again, Pokopia. I did beat Ooh, and I will talk about it on another episode, and I guess I'm still kind of playing the Virtual Boy on and off. I played Mario's Tennis and Clash for a bit. That was a nice time. I have to forbid myself from buying any more games until Tomodachi Life comes out. And even then, will I have beaten Monster Hunter Stories 3 by then and burned out of Pokopia by then? Who knows? Too many games. We really don't need a Direct, to be honest. And if you want to play Switch 1 games, Switch 2 got a huge update called Handheld Boost, where Switch 1 games can now output as if they were docked. For example, if it output at 1080p in docked mode on Switch 1, it can now output at 1080p in handheld mode on Switch 2. Some games got a general resolution and frame rate boost when played on Switch 2, but this is more of a universal toggle and applies to a wider variety of games. People have done some great comparisons, like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 output at like 540p on handheld mode, and now it's much better looking. And the Xenoblade games also got a major boost. I think this is going to be very useful for upcoming indies that don't have a dedicated Switch 2 version just yet. And even something like Tomodachi Life and Rhythm Heaven should look much nicer with this feature. Nintendo's strategy to integrate the Switch 1 library into the Switch 2 is really fascinating. I think a lot of people want a hard cut. They want Nintendo to say, no more Switch 1 games ever. But realistically, they see the value in players continuing to expand their Switch 1 library on the hardware. I mean, Nintendo is getting the money either way. I think people are judging Nintendo's success solely by how many copies their first-party Switch 2 games are selling, but people are still buying heaps of Switch 1 games, and Nintendo is profiting off of that. They still get that money, again. I do wonder what will be the last Switch 1 game from anyone. I mean, we are still seeing PS4 games. And if you're a game dev who is releasing some pixel art game in 2032, might as well have a Switch 1 SKU. I mean, why not? Trying to think of some Japan-specific news. Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building is having a Pokemon card-themed map projection starting on March 20th. This is a huge animated projection they do on the size of one of Tokyo's tallest buildings. At least it was one of the tallest buildings once upon a time. They've done a lot of Godzilla and anime collabs, but not so many game ones, but I do know Pac-Man has shown up there. So check it out if you are in Shinjuku. Also, Bandai is putting out Metal Gear-themed gashapon, specifically for the Machaboke line. Machaboke means waiting in vain, so it's characters sitting with their knees to their chest, pensively waiting for something that will never happen. Yes, gacha are weird. But here you can get Rex, Ray, Snake, and then Snake in a box. I mean, I hope I get Ray. That's the coolest Metal Gear, right? Right? Okay, as you contemplate on the best Metal Gear, let's wrap it up for now. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well, it really helps. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Blue Sky, Twitter, Threads, Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. The next episode will be on April 5th. See you next time. Matane!